When you stop texting and calling, something profound begins to happen, not just in your relationship, but also within yourself. You create space, and in that space, you allow the dynamic between you and the other person to shift. You see, communication is a bridge, and when you're constantly initiating it, you're not giving the other person a chance to step forward. It's not about playing games, it's about balance. It's about stepping back and letting things flow naturally. Men are wired to respond to mystery. They're intrigued by what they don't fully understand or possess. So when you step back, when you stop texting and calling, it sends a subtle message: I value myself enough not to chase. And that's powerful. That's what gets a man's attention. Suddenly he begins to notice your absence. The text he was accustomed to seeing every morning, it's not there. The calls that reassured him of your interest, they're missing. And that silence becomes louder than words. This isn't about manipulation. It's about creating a dynamic where the effort isn't one-sided. When you're always the one reaching out, you're setting the tone that you'll always be available no matter what. But when you stop, when you pull back, you give him the opportunity to reflect on what your presence in his life really means. He starts to ask himself questions he might not have before. Why haven't I heard from her? What is she doing? Have I taken her for granted? And those questions spark curiosity, which often leads to action. Men are natural pursuers. It's not just a stereotype, it's a deeply ingrained instinct. When something of value seems just out of reach, they feel compelled to move toward it. So when you step back, you're not losing him, you're giving him the chance to pursue you. And in that pursuit, he begins to see your worth in a new light. He realizes that your time, your energy, and your attention are not things to be taken lightly. They are gifts, and gifts must be earned. But here's the thing, this isn't about him alone. It's about you two. When you stop texting and calling, you're not just changing the dynamic with him, you're changing the dynamic with yourself. You're reclaiming your time, your energy, and your sense of self. You're reminding yourself that your world doesn't revolve around someone else's validation. And that's the key. The moment you stop chasing is the moment you start standing still long enough for the right things and people to come to you. This is where true connection begins, not from a place of need or desperation, but from a place of balance and mutual respect. And that's the kind of foundation that builds lasting relationships. When you step back, you're not creating distance, you're creating space for clarity, growth, and ultimately love. When you stop texting and calling, one of the first things that happens is that you regain control over your emotional energy. Let's be honest, how many times have you sent a text and then anxiously stared at your phone, waiting for a reply? Or felt the sting of silence when a call went unanswered? That cycle of constantly giving and hoping for a response can be emotionally draining. It's like pouring water into a cup that never seems to fill up. By stepping back, you're breaking that cycle and redirecting that energy back to yourself, where it belongs. This is about learning to be at peace with stillness. When you stop reaching out, you create space to hear your own thoughts and feelings. You start to realize that your worth isn't tied to someone's response or lack thereof. You begin to understand that their silence doesn't define you, it reveals them. It's a powerful shift when you recognize that communication is a two-way street. If you're the only one walking down it, then it's not a relationship, it's a pursuit. And you deserve better than that. Stepping back is not easy, especially if you've been conditioned to believe that relationships require constant effort to survive. But here's the truth, effort has to come from both sides. When you stop texting and calling, you give the other person the opportunity to show up or not. Either way, you gain clarity. You learn who values your presence enough to notice your absence. And that clarity is a gift because it frees you from the weight of uncertainty. You might notice feelings of discomfort at first. Questions like, what if he doesn't notice? Or what if he moves on may come up. But those moments of doubt are an invitation to trust yourself more deeply. You are not here to convince someone of your value. Your value is inherent. And the right person will recognize it without constant reminders. When you stop reaching out, you're saying, I am enough as I am. I don't need to prove my worth to anyone. And something magical happens when you reclaim your emotional energy. You start to invest it in yourself. That energy, once spent on waiting, worrying, or wondering, is now available for your own growth and happiness. You may find yourself pursuing hobbies you love, spending time with people who uplift you, or simply enjoying the freedom of not being tied to someone else's schedule. That shift is transformative because it reminds you of how full and vibrant your life can be when you're not waiting for someone else to fill it. Remember, when you stop texting and calling, you're not losing control, you gain it. You're allowing the relationship to find its natural balance. And most importantly, you're giving yourself the gift of self-respect and peace of mind. When you stop texting and calling, something profound begins to happen. You create a space for a man to take the lead. In relationships, there's a natural rhythm, a balance between giving and receiving. But when you're the one always initiating, always reaching out, you unintentionally disrupt that balance. By stepping back, you allow the other person to decide whether they value your presence enough to step forward. Men are wired to value what they earn, not what's constantly given without effort. When you pull back, it's not about playing games or manipulating, it's about respecting the dynamic of effort and appreciation. If a man truly values you, he will notice your absence and take steps to bridge the gap. That's when you see his intentions clearly, whether he's willing to put in the effort to keep you in his life or if he was simply taking your presence for granted. This shift creates an opportunity for genuine connection. When a man makes the choice to reach out, to text, or to call, it comes from a place of authenticity. He's not doing it because he feels pressured or obligated. He's doing it because he genuinely wants to. And isn't that what we all desire? To be with someone who chooses us willingly, not out of habit or convenience, but because they see our worth. By stepping back, you also set a standard. You're silently communicating, I value myself enough not to chase after anyone. I believe that relationships should be mutual. That kind of confidence is magnetic. It's not about playing hard to get, it's about truly being hard to lose. When you carry yourself with that level of self-respect, it resonates deeply, and the right person will rise to meet you. But let's be real, this process isn't without its challenges. When you stop initiating, the silence can feel deafening at first. You might worry, what if he doesn't reach out? Does that mean he doesn't care? But here's the truth, the actions or inactions of another person don't define your worth. They simply reveal where they stand in your life. And if someone chooses not to step forward, that's your answer. It's not rejection, it's redirection towards someone who will value you the way you deserve. As you embrace this approach, you'll notice something beautiful, the peace that comes with letting go of the need to control. You're no longer chasing, overthinking, or wondering what to do next. Instead, you're rooted in your power, knowing that the right connections will flow naturally. And when someone does reach out, you'll know it's because they truly value you, not because you were the one constantly making the effort. So by stepping back, you're not losing anything. You're creating the conditions for something real, something balanced, and something worthy of your time and energy. Let go of the need to text, call, or chase, and trust that the right person will find their way to you. When you step back and stop texting or calling, it's not just about giving the man space, it's also about reclaiming your own energy. So often, we pour so much of ourselves into trying to keep the connection alive that we forget about ourselves in the process. But when you stop, you create room to focus on your life, your growth, and the things that truly matter to you. This is where your power lies, redirecting your energy inward instead of outward. Think about it. How much time have you spent second guessing your actions or wondering why someone hasn't called back? That mental and emotional energy is precious, and it should be invested in things that elevate you, not in overanalyzing someone else's behavior. When you let go of the constant need to initiate, you send a powerful message, not just to the man, but to yourself. You're affirming that your time, your peace, and your happiness are valuable. You're saying, I'm not here to convince anyone of my worth. My life is too meaningful to spend it chasing someone's attention. That kind of clarity is not just liberating, it's transformative. And here's the irony, when you stop focusing so much on the other person, you become more attractive. Why? Because confidence is captivating. When you're centered in your own life, doing things that bring you joy and fulfillment, it creates a natural magnetism. People are drawn to individuals who exude self-assurance and independence, and men are no exception. What's more, stepping back gives you the chance to evaluate the situation objectively. Sometimes when we're too close to something, we lose perspective. But when you create distance, you can see things as they truly are. Is the connection balanced, or have you been carrying the weight of the relationship? Is it showing genuine interest, or have you been overcompensating? These are the questions that become clearer when you're not caught up in the daily cycle of texting and calling. And let's not forget about the emotional freedom that comes with stepping back. You're no longer waiting for a response, hoping for a call, or feeling disappointed when it doesn't come. Instead, you're focused on what makes you happy on your own journey and on the people and activities that bring joy into your life. It's about reclaiming your emotional independence. By doing this, you also redefine the dynamics of the relationship. You're not just someone who gives endlessly, you're someone who expects reciprocity and mutual respect. That's not being harsh or unkind, that's setting the standard. And a man who truly values you will recognize and appreciate that. He'll see that you're not someone to be taken lightly or for granted. So when you stop texting and calling, it's not a loss, it's a shift in priorities. You're prioritizing yourself, your happiness, and you're doing so. You create the space for someone who values you to step in and meet you halfway. That's the kind of connection worth waiting for. When you take a step back and stop initiating contact, something remarkable happens. You create space. This space is not just for the other person, but also for yourself. Often when we're constantly reaching out, texting, calling, and trying to maintain the connection, we don't realize we're not giving the other person the opportunity to show us who they really are. Stepping back is a way of saying, I've done my part, now it's your turn to show up. In relationships, balance is everything. Imagine a scale if one side is constantly being weighed down by effort while the other side remains untouched. The balance is lost. But when you step back, you allow the other person to take responsibility for their side of the scale. You're no longer tipping it over with your efforts. Instead, you're saying, if you value this connection, you will find a way to maintain it too. And if they don't, then you've received clarity, a gift that's far more valuable than chasing someone who isn't willing to meet you halfway. This isn't about playing games or manipulating someone into responding. It's about respecting the natural flow of relationships. Real connections don't need to be forced. They don't need constant maintenance to stay alive. When you stop chasing, you allow things to unfold naturally. You're giving the other person the opportunity to choose freely and genuinely. And in their choice, you gain insight into their intentions and feelings. What's more, by stepping back, you're protecting your own emotional well-being. Constantly putting yourself out there only to feel ignored or undervalued takes a toll. It chips away at your self-esteem and leaves you feeling drained. But when you choose to step away, you regain control over your emotions. You're no longer handing someone else the power to dictate how you feel about yourself. Instead, you're affirming, I am enough as I am. I don't need to overextend to prove my worth. This approach also forces the other person to take a moment to reflect. When someone notices that you're no longer texting or calling, they start to think about why. They evaluate the relationship in a way they might not have if you had continued to fill the silence. Sometimes absence speaks louder than any words ever could. It's in that silence that they begin to recognize your value and perhaps their own shortcomings. And let's not overlook what this space does for you. It gives you time to reconnect with yourself. When you're no longer consumed by thoughts of someone else, you have the energy to focus on your passions, your goals, and your dreams. You become the center of your own life again. This shift in focus not only strengthens your self-esteem, but also reminds you of the incredible things you bring to the table, things that don't require validation from anyone else. When you stop initiating contact, you're not just testing the other person's commitment, you're affirming your own standards. You're saying, I'm worth effort and I deserve someone who sees that without me having to constantly remind them. And in doing so, you set the tone for all your relationships moving forward, one of mutual respect, effort, and appreciation. So by stepping back, you're doing more than just creating space. You're creating clarity, setting boundaries, and reinforcing your own worth. And that clarity is priceless. It allows you to move forward, either with someone who values you or on your own path toward greater things. That's not a loss, it's a profound gain. When you stop texting and calling, one of the most profound things that happens is you shift the power dynamic in the relationship. Often in relationships or potential connections, one person can unintentionally take on the role of the pursuer while the other becomes more passive. This dynamic can make the pursuer feel as if they must continually prove their worth, always being the one to keep the relationship alive. But by stepping back, you change that rhythm. You no longer carry the weight of keeping things moving. And in doing so, you invite the other person to step into the space you've left. This shift does more than just give you clarity, it sparks a reaction. When someone notices your absence, they begin to evaluate the value of your presence. They might not have consciously realized how much they relied on your consistent effort, your messages, your calls, but when it's gone, it becomes clear. People don't always appreciate what they have until it's missing. By removing yourself from that role of always being available, you create an opportunity for the other person to miss you, to think about you, and to take action if they truly value the connection. What's powerful about this shift is that it's not about manipulation or games. It's about standing firm in your self-worth. When you stop reaching out, you're sending a silent but profound message: I'm worth the effort, and I'm not going to chase anyone to prove that. This message is not spoken, but it's felt deeply by the other person. They are forced to decide, are they willing to put in the effort to reach out, to pursue, to show you that they value you? Or will they let the connection fade because they weren't truly invested? Either way, you win. You either gain clarity or you gain a renewed sense of mutual effort and respect. It's also important to recognize that this shift benefits you just as much as it challenges them. By stepping back, you reclaim your time, your energy, and your emotional space. You're no longer consumed by wondering why they haven't replied or feeling the pressure to keep the conversation alive. Instead, you redirect that energy toward yourself, toward your goals, your passions, and your own personal growth. This creates a powerful transformation. When you focus on building your own life, you become more attractive, not just to that person, but to everyone around you. That confidence, independence, and self-respect are magnetic qualities that draw people in effortlessly. And here's the truth: if someone genuinely values you, they will step up. They'll reach out. They'll make an effort because they won't want to risk losing someone they care about. But if they don't, that tells you everything you need to know. Relationships that require constant chasing and convincing aren't built to last. By stopping, you're allowing yourself to see the reality of the connection without the cloud of your efforts, making it appear stronger than it actually is. Ultimately, stepping back isn't about punishing the other person or testing their loyalty. It's about honoring yourself. It's about understanding that your worth isn't tied to how much you can give or how often you can initiate. It's about giving both yourself and the other person the freedom to make choices based on genuine feelings, not out of obligation or habit. So when you stop texting and calling and you shift that dynamic, you're creating an environment where only authentic connections can thrive. You're allowing the relationship or lack thereof to reveal itself. And in doing so, you're aligning yourself with people who value just as much as you value them. That kind of clarity, that kind of authenticity, it's a gift you give yourself. When you stop texting and calling, you're giving yourself the space to assess the energy dynamics in the relationship. Often we get so caught up in the cycle of communication that we don't pause to evaluate the balance. Are you always the one initiating? Are you consistently investing more time and effort than you're receiving in return? When you step back, you allow the truth of the connection to surface. Relationships are meant to be mutual, a give and take that feels effortless because both individuals are equally invested. If you're always giving, there's a deeper question to explore. Is this relationship truly serving you? Stepping back is an act of self-love. It's not about withdrawing out of anger or frustration. It's about reclaiming your energy and respecting your own boundaries. When you stop over-investing, you start to see the relationship for what it truly is, rather than what you wish it could be. This can be a sobering but necessary realization. Sometimes we overextend ourselves because we're afraid of losing someone, even if that person isn't fully present in the relationship. But think about it, if you have to work so hard just to keep someone in your life, is that a connection worth holding on to? This process also shifts your focus inward, back to yourself. Instead of pouring all your energy into someone else, you can redirect it toward your own growth, passions, and well-being. When you prioritize yourself, you elevate your own standards for what you're willing to accept in a relationship. You start to realize that you don't have to chase anyone. The right person will naturally want to meet you halfway. This shift in perspective not only empowers you, but also changes how others perceive you. Confidence, self-respect, and emotional independence are incredibly attractive qualities. By stepping back, you're reinforcing these traits within yourself. And when you stop chasing, something fascinating happens. People notice the change. They sense the energy shift, even if it's subtle. The person who is used to you always initiating may start to question why you've gone quiet. They may begin to reevaluate their own feelings and actions. Sometimes this creates the space they need to step up and show you their true intentions. Other times it reveals a lack of genuine interest or effort. Either way, you gain clarity. Clarity is freedom. It's freedom. It's a way of unburdening yourself from relationships that aren't reciprocal. This isn't about playing games or testing anyone. It's about living in alignment with your own value. When you stop initiating, you create an opportunity for the other person to show you how much they're willing to invest. If they don't reach out, it's not a loss, it's a revelation. It shows you where their priorities lie and whether they were ever truly deserving of your time and attention. On the other hand, if they do make an effort, it's a sign that they recognize your worth and want to maintain the connection. Ultimately, stepping back teaches you an essential truth. The right relationships don't require chasing. The right connections flow naturally because they're built on mutual respect, interest, and effort. By pulling back, you're creating space for those kinds of relationships to find you. You're showing the world and yourself that you're someone who knows their worth and won't settle for less. And that's a powerful message, one that transforms not just your relationships, but also the way you see yourself. When you stop texting and calling, you might notice a subtle but powerful shift in your emotional state. The constant barrage of communication, checking your phone for messages, eagerly waiting for responses, wondering where they are or what they're doing can create a level of emotional dependency that is draining. It's not just the act of texting or calling, it's the anticipation, the expectation, and the emotional investment that comes with it. You're putting a part of yourself on hold, waiting for someone else to make you feel validated or important. By stepping back, you free yourself from that cycle. You stop waiting for someone else's approval to define your worth. This is not just about romantic relationships, it's about understanding that your happiness, your sense of self-worth, cannot and should not be dictated by someone else's actions or inactions. By not texting or calling, you create space to reclaim your emotional autonomy. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It simply means you stop allowing your emotional state to hinge on someone else's behavior. This detachment can be incredibly liberating. It's like removing a weight that you didn't even realize you were carrying. When you stop constantly seeking someone's attention, your mind clears. You find yourself focusing on your own needs, your own life, and your own goals. You start realizing that you have the power to make yourself happy without relying on external validation. You start to see your own worth without needing anyone else to confirm it for you. Another fascinating outcome is that you become more present in the relationships that truly matter. When you stop over-investing in one person's approval, you can start nurturing other connections, friends, family, and even your relationship with yourself. You begin to pour your energy into things that add value to your life. This shift in focus not only benefits you emotionally, but also elevates the quality of your connections with others. People are drawn to those who are self-sufficient, emotionally grounded, and content with themselves. By taking a step back, you begin to see your own value, and that energy naturally attracts the right people into your life. In essence, when you stop texting and calling, you stop allowing external forces to dictate your emotional state. You create space for growth, for reflection, and for self-discovery. And ultimately, you learn the most important lesson, that your happiness and emotional fulfillment are in your hands, not in the hands of anyone else. And when you finally recognize that, you'll find that your relationships, both with yourself and others, become more balanced, more fulfilling, and much healthier. When you stop texting and calling, something else begins to shift that many people don't realize at first. It's the change in energy. You see, in relationships, we often bring our own energy into the space. When you're constantly reaching out, initiating contact, or responding in a way that shows you're on edge or anxious, it sends a subtle message of neediness. And not just neediness, but also uncertainty. You may not even realize it, but that energy is palpable. Now, when you step back and create some distance, the energy between you and the other person changes. By not texting or calling, you take away the sense of desperation, and what's left is your natural, authentic energy. You no longer feel like you're chasing something or someone. Instead, you're showing up as yourself, unencumbered by the need for external validation. This shift in energy can have a profound impact on how others perceive you. People are drawn to those who are self-assured and balanced, and that energy can create space for healthier, more meaningful interactions. This change in energy isn't just noticeable to others, it's felt deeply by you too. You begin to reclaim your own power. When you stop initiating contact, you stop focusing so much on what the other person is doing. Instead, you turn inward and focus on your own life, your own goals, and your own well-being. You become more mindful of how you're spending your time and energy. And you begin to make decisions based on what aligns with your values and needs, not from a place of seeking approval or attention. What also happens when you stop texting or calling is that you allow the space for the other person to take initiative. And this can be incredibly revealing. Many times, people find themselves in one-sided relationships because they're always the ones reaching out. When you stop doing that, you make room for the other person to show their level of interest. If they truly care, they will come to you. If they don't, you have your answer. And you're no longer stuck in that cycle of uncertainty. In the end, when you stop texting and calling, it's not about playing games. It's about reclaiming your energy, your sense of self-worth, and your time. You show up in a more authentic, grounded way, and you allow the natural flow of relationships to unfold. The results: you become more attractive to others because you no longer act out of neediness, but from a place of confidence and self-respect. This, in turn, will lead to deeper, more genuine connections that are built on mutual respect and understanding rather than emotional dependency. And that's something worth cultivating. When you stop texting and calling, you are creating space for both you and the other person to experience the relationship from a new perspective. It's like hitting the reset button. Often, when we're in constant communication, we become so focused on the daily interactions that we forget to step back and evaluate the overall dynamics of the relationship. Constant texting and calling can create an illusion of closeness that may not always be reflective of true emotional connection. By stopping, you allow yourself and the other person to reflect on the deeper aspects of the relationship. This space gives room for clarity to emerge. Sometimes when we're constantly engaged, we fail to see things for what they truly are. The absence of constant communication creates a vacuum where both parties are left to reflect on their needs, desires, and the future of the relationship. It can give both individuals a chance to reassess whether they are truly aligned with each other or if they are simply filling a void with repetitive interactions. Moreover, by not reaching out, you stop feeding the narrative that the relationship needs constant affirmation or validation. When we are constantly texting or calling, we may unintentionally reinforce the idea that the relationship needs to be maintained through frequent communication. This dependency on constant contact can sometimes erode the true foundation of the relationship. When you stop doing that, you send a message that a relationship should stand on its own merit, based on trust, mutual respect, and understanding, not on the frequency of messages or calls. Additionally, when you stop texting or calling, you're teaching the other person to respect your time and boundaries. Many times, people take others for granted when they know that person is always available, always reaching out. When you stop, you're silently setting a boundary that you have your own life, your own priorities, and that you won't settle for less than you deserve. This teaches the other person to not take your time or presence for granted and can lead to more meaningful exchanges when communication does happen. This process isn't about punishing anyone, it's about empowering yourself. When you step back and give yourself the space you need, you'll notice that the relationship dynamics begin to shift. If the other person truly values the connection, they will step up and reach out. If they don't, you've saved yourself time and emotional energy. You learn that not every interaction needs to be constant, and that relationships can thrive without the pressure of keeping in touch all the time. In the end, this shift is not about playing hard to get. It's about honoring yourself and your time. It's about showing that you're not willing to settle for any relationship that isn't meaningful, balanced, and based on real emotional connection. When you stop texting and calling, you're creating space for the right person to step up, to show their intentions, and to prove their worth. And that's when you truly start to attract what you deserve.